It's a tough problem, and one of the things we've seen over the last 40 years is that gap has been growing a lot. Especially starting around the 1970s, a lot of things changed in labor markets, particularly there just weren't as many good jobs for people to have, and so that gap started growing. And then we also saw at the very top of the income distribution, corporate salaries just skyrocketed, especially in the last 10 or so years, and that explains that widening gap.
Essentially, the wealthy have been getting wealthier and the poor have been getting poorer. Middle class has been shrinking for many years. That's due to poor management in the government, and right now our government's non-functional, so really nothing's being done about it, and the wealthy are just getting wealthier and the poor are getting poorer.
The official measure, approximately 15% of the people are poor in the U.S., similar number in California. But that doesn't take into account a lot of things like cost of living. And we know, for example, in the Bay Area that housing costs are really high. So for someone who's in the lower half of the income distribution, it's really hard to find a home and make ends meet on the types of wages that are offered. And so we've developed a new measure that takes these housing cost differences into account. And when we look at that, we find that California actually has the highest poverty rate when we look at this new measure that takes into account those differences in cost of living.
I had been in a lull for about 10 or 15 years where I settled for a status quo, where I got to a point in my recovery where I wasn't really better, but I wasn't really sick. And essentially I just lived in a home for 14 years and accepted whatever came my way. And I didn't realize my potential until I reached street.
I think if you look at the research, there's very little to suggest that people are poor because they're lazy or something like that. And by the same token, I think a lot of what makes a person gives a person the opportunity to be rich is not something that they've gotten to by necessarily just by working hard. Now, that's not to say that they haven't worked hard. They probably have, but they've also had a lot of other circumstances that went their way. Or they come from a family background that got them the education they need.
My goals for my future are basically just to, get out of homelessness, get stabilized, your way back to like the position that you used to be in society, or just at the pay scale that you used to be at. Can be very hard, and times have changed, times have moved on, and during those times when I was going through my really bad anxiety and depression, a lot has changed.
Well, I plan to pull down a full-time job eventually and just be self-sufficient and be self-independent of the Social Security Administration. I plan to one day step away from my benefits. And,
the stigma for a homeless person of any kind is, wow, those people are dirty, and why can't they clean up after themselves, because they always leave a mess everywhere they go. So having that sort of a stigma, you see people treat people badly just because they're homeless. There might not be anything wrong that this person's doing, but there's that connotation with that. Some poor people tend to forget that, it hasn't been a great last 10 years for anybody. So the person who might have had 2 houses before and lived very comfortably or whatever, now they're down to 1. So they might not be looking to help the people less fortunate than themselves so much, because they're trying to cover themselves. So they're trying just to live their life. Not only do the people with more money have to, maybe help out a little bit more, but the people who don't have that much, they shouldn't just, jump to conclusions about, well, they're rich, they don't care about us. That might not be the case. The case might be where, hey, that guy used to help out every year, give money to different organizations that would help, Goodwill, whatever, but now they can't so much, just because of the way times are.
Well, poverty rates, particularly talking about people in the lower end of the distribution of income, I mean, in the short term, you know, well, we can get people jobs, but maybe there's not enough jobs for people to get, or not, at least not enough good jobs. You know, one of the things that's been in the media a lot lately is the fact that minimum wage rates are just not high enough to, for some people, not even high enough to get them above the poverty rate for their size family. And so raising the minimum wage can certainly help in the short run. When jobs don't work, then we need a strong safety net to kick in, or when someone loses their job, we need a safety net that kicks in and helps them weather that period of unemployment. It's very important that there is a strong safety net in those cases, because those periods of unemployment can really be long run detrimental to someone's ability to escape poverty. And then in the long run, I think education is key. We've really got to invest to make sure that people at the lower income levels have a fair chance to get a very solid education, because that's really key to being able to get the types of jobs that exist in America today. I think one of the main things that social policy needs to do is try to prevent people from getting into some long-term poverty trap. And you know, there's a lot of good public policy programs that can kick in and help stave that off, because when that happens, you know, it not only affects the adult who's fallen into poverty, but you know, if they have children, then the children can suffer, you know, life. The research shows that, you know, not having enough food, for example, can cause cognitive problems that people can't do as well in school. They just simply can't do as well because they're hungry, and that can have long-term knock-on effects throughout their whole life. And it's hard to fall out of that top rung once you're there. It's also hard to rise up from the bottom just by your own accord. But you know, I think there are some signs that maybe it's beginning to slow down, that widening.
See that we want to be part of the solution and not just part of the problem. That really it changes the viewpoint of people that see homeless people, and it also changes the viewpoint of the homeless person, and the fact that they can, you know, have a higher self-esteem and things like that.
I really want to step up.